The Budget and Finance Committee to order. While we're waiting for, we have one public comment card. Cheryl Eichley for public comment. Oh, great.
Hi.
Hi. My former councilman, now I'm in a new district. Okay.
You're in District 1 now, right?
District 4.
4.
Yeah. My name is Cheryl Eichley, and like I said, I live in District 4. I appreciate your time today. I was here a couple of weeks ago, and a couple of the councilmen asked me what standards Occupy Los Angeles has with what banks that they will work with. And I haven't gone to them and asked them yet because I'm still trying to figure out what banks have done what, and I think part of the responsible banking ordinance addresses that, as well as another item today, item number 6, that addresses that as well. So that will help us determine which banks meet our standards. I do have some questions, though, for you guys. What if there was some evidence that shows that, say, Wells Fargo, the retail bank that the city does banking with, invests in detention centers that house undocumented citizens? What if there was evidence that shows Wells Fargo donated to Georgia's anti-immigration laws? If this is true, these are all activities that are legal, unlike the other items that we're talking about or the other activities we're talking about in item 6 on today's agenda. Are these sorts of banks the kind of banks that we want to do business with the city? Business lobbyists are arguing that the information we are requesting is already reported to the U.S. and state government. Great. It shouldn't be that hard to also include us in those reports as well. As far as other information requested, it's my understanding that New York City Council has a similar resolution in front of them, and there is a nonprofit that does a yearly report on the activities in the city and the banks, and it's my understanding that the banks just give this nonprofit this information, and so it shouldn't be that hard for the banks to give us the information that we're looking for. I called that nonprofit to confirm that that's the case. And many of the objections we're hearing from banks lobbyists, that they don't seem legitimate when you think about them critically, when you have all the facts. All we're asking for is all the facts. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me just comment on, you also have a card for, if you do not want to be here all day, you can go to number 6, because it's my intent to move that on consent. So you can make your comments on number 6.
Okay. On item number 6, I just read it through it now. I wasn't aware that it had been presented, but when I saw today's agenda, I wanted to speak to it. I think it's very important for us to understand the illegal activities that the banks have been doing. So I support this motion. I want to know what sort of illegal activities these financial institutions have been involved with. When I was here a couple of weeks ago, what I understood from the committee members is that we only deal with one retail bank in Los Angeles, but we deal with other banks in regards to like bonds and other financial services that the city has. What is the big difference between getting a bond from, say, Wells Fargo or Bank of America or JP Morgan Chase, when they just underwrite in that specific business bonds, but with the same exact name, they have retail outlets called Chase and Wells Fargo and Bank of America. And these retail outlets, even though they may be structurally, legally separate entities, are they not? Do the profits not go back to these banks? If JP Morgan or Bank of America has a lot of home loans in the city of Los Angeles. If their retail branch frauds people, takes their home against the law without the original mortgage, even when there are court cases that tell the banks to give the home back to the original homeowner, isn't it important that we don't do bond business with these banks as well, these sort of illegal activities? Are these things not important to the city? Those are the sort of things that I would like to bring up. I noticed in this report that there's 50 municipalities considering the responsible banking ordinance. That's a lot of cities that are now coming to this. We know Philadelphia and Cleveland both have this already, and Boston and New York, and I guess 50 others are considering it as well. I really just would like to see this information. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me just advise you that the ordinance and information will be coming on the meeting of the 21st.
Yes,
Okay. And so
I'm aware.
That way you will get access to that report. And it's my intent today on item number 6 is to ask the CAO to incorporate the information from that motion into that larger report.
Okay, thank
Okay?
you.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Colleagues, if I could ask concurrence, we have a quorum, Mr. Koretz, Mr. Rosendahl, myself, Bernard Parks as chair.
And Mr.
Mr. Newland is here also, so we have 4 members. And I'd ask that we can go consent on number 5, which is a lien from Office of Finance.
Yes.
Okay?
Yeah, I want to ask a question on that one.
Okay, now, if you are going to get into the specifics, we're going to have to do it in closed session.
And then we'll do it in closed session.
Okay.
I have to ask some questions on that one.
Okay, so we'll, then also if we can, on item 6, I'd like to see if we move that in consent, but give instructions to ask the CAO to include the response to this motion in their larger banking responsibility report, and have both of these items on the November 21st agenda.
I support that, Mr. Parks, 100%. I'd just like to ask just one question, if they could
Okay.
come up, the CAO or the CLA, on this one.
We have the CAO over here.
Yep.
Yeah.
And Karen?
Okay. You want to do it?
Or
Yeah.
Roy? Okay.
Doesn't matter. What Mr. Parks just said, I just want to make sure very clear. To help us understand what's going on, it is critical for us that we understand item 6 enough, as he said, when it comes back to the committee again next week with the other part of this ordinance. Do you feel comfortable we can get that data together and make that happen for next Monday?
In terms of the data or in terms of the
Well,
response?
I just want to get the answers to this so that we can incorporate what they may be next week, or how do you intend to use this motion?
So the basic premise of the motion is asking for costs, due to the city or that due to the illegal actions against the city.
Yeah.
If you may recall, last week we had a closed session item as far as one of the lawsuits, and I think on Wednesday we're having another closed session on the second lawsuit.
Right.
In that discussion, there was, it includes some information on information that the outside counsel has and does not have. And so based on that discussion and discussion that we're going to have with the city attorney, we'll include whatever we can that does not jeopardize the outcome of the litigation.
Okay.
I agree with that. That was the closed session discussion with the cost figures that can be released.
Thank you.
Any other question? Okay, so we'll consent on 6 with that instruction to have this back before committee on November 21st and include the responses that are available responding to this motion in the larger banking responsibility report that's also scheduled for that date. Okay? Item 8, if we can go and consent on that item.
So moved.
Okay, any issues?
No, I've got one question on that.
No?
If I could.
We can have Office of Finance come up.
Just a quick question. It appears that the contract date, the period for the contract exceeds the sunset date of the legislation. And so shouldn't the contract end when the legislation?
That's correct. Ed Carrera, Assistant Director, Office of Finance. The sunset date of the AB 63/SB 1146 legislation is December 31st, 2014. I'm sorry, January 1st, 2014. However, what is being proposed by the Franchise Tax Board is to repeal the sunset dates in their calendar year 2012 legislative proposals. They will be coming out with a proposed legislation to repeal the sunset dates. We have been in contact with the Franchise Tax Board. We will be coming forward to this committee as well as the full council once they have proposed that legislation and have assigned a bill number to seek this committee's approval and support for that legislation.
Do we have a clause, however, in
Yes.
this contract that says if for some reason on
That language-
date that it sunsets, the contract is over that day.
Yes, we do have specific language within the contract that covers
Sunset issue.
the situation if that sunset date is not repealed. We have addressed that with the Franchise Tax Board.
And the clause or the terminology in the contract language specifically states that the contract would be null and void that day?
Yes, we do have that language.
Okay.
Again, it is contingent upon the extension of that sunset date.
Okay.
Let me ask also, if we could ask Office of Finance to get with the clerk and provide us an overview of over the last 3 years, the amount of revenue that we have generated through this process. So we just have some background material as we move forward on the next 3-year agreement. Okay.
We can do that.
Okay.
I also wanted to add that, number one, we do wish to thank this committee, and in particular the chair, for your full support of the past contracts with the Franchise Tax Board and the data sharing agreement. Upon Ms. Christoffel, the general manager's appointment to the Director of Finance. This was one of the key legislative components that we pushed. Ms. Christoffel identified this as a key item in terms of best practices for identifying businesses that were not registered. The program to date, since 2002, has generated over $142 million in business tax revenue that has been identified by our staff. In addition to the revenue that's been generated, we've added over 152,000 accounts to the city's business tax rolls. So this program has been highly effective, and we do appreciate the support from this committee.
You know what would be important when you mentioned the 152,000 to clarify whether those are businesses that have been here for a period of time and we just found out about them. Are they new businesses? So we have some idea of what's incorporated in that 152,000.
Sure, we will look into that. Obviously, in the initial inception and years of the program, some of those businesses had been operated in the city for more than 1 or 2 years. However, as we have put the program into practice, which is now almost 10 years, we've identified fewer and fewer businesses that have been operating for an extended period. Most of the businesses that we've been identifying and registering over the last several years have only been in business for a year or two.
Okay, thank you. So we'll move that item 8 with those instructions. Okay, we'll go in closed session at this time. Item 2 is going to be continued at the request of the city attorney. So we'll have items 1, 3, 4, and 5. Committee, we have 4 members, Mr. Under, Mr. Rosenthal, Mr. Koretz, myself, Bernard Parks, as chair. We've dealt with items 1, 3, 4, and 5 in closed session. We'd like to, on open session on item 5, if you could read that into the record and we can move that item.
Yes, item 5 is Office of Finance report relative to requesting approval to record a lien for unpaid taxes amount of $44,814.47 against property owned by Adult Day Health Center of America, Inc. That item was approved.
We'll move item 5.
So they,
and with that, with instruction that for the information requested by Mr. Rosenthal before this item comes to council.
that is correct. So that should take us to item 7. Item 7 is communication from the mayor and communication from Machado relative to the acceptance of the U.S. Department of Homeland Security fiscal year 2010 Regional Catastrophic Planning Program Grant Award, an amount of $3,570,000 for the period August 1st, 2010 to August 30th, 2013.
Good afternoon. I think we've all read this, but I just had a couple of questions on the issue of matching funds and for the CAO. Has that $621,000, is it in the 11-12 budget, or is that funds that we'll have to locate?
I'm sorry, could you?
The $621,000 matching, is that already in the 11-12 budget, or is
Correct,
that?
it is.
So it's in the budget. Okay. Let me ask this on what is the matching funds for all departments involved? If the city's paying $621, what are other departments paying?
Oh, for the,
So we're paying 621 for a $1.95 million grant. So
correct.
like, what is that?
Maria Ramos with Office of the CAO. EMD's portion would be $324,792.
Now, who is that?
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
What agency?
I'm sorry.
You said, you gave us a figure of $300-some thousand. What agency was that?
That is the Emergency Management Department.
Okay, that's their allotment, but what about matching funds for departments outside the city? Is everybody
Oh,
paying?
outside of the city?
Yeah, the city, if I understand it, is paying 621,000 match
Correct.
for its what is it?
Actually, I'm reading it a different way. I'm reading it a different way, if I could.
And somebody needs to explain, because it shows here that
Well, the partner jurisdictions, is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Their portion of the match?
Yes.
It would be $569,473.
So is our portion actually the 1.95? Or is that what's doled, then that portion is doled out? That's our portion.
The city's allocation of the grant is the 1.9 million, and the match for that 1.9 million for the city's portion is the 620,000.
And so the rest of the outside partner agencies are matching at 569,
Correct.
and then what's their total allocation?
Their total combined allocation is 1,622,999.
Okay. Now, I'm assuming if we did not come up with that full match, we wouldn't get the full amount of the grant. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Okay. All right. And then now, let me ask CAO also, is that an appropriate expenditure for code enforcement for the $98,000 to be a part of the city match? And does that reduce the general fund match below the 621?
Correct. If housing uses the code enforcement towards their match, then it would reduce the general fund up.
So is that something we are recommending and that they're going to do? Or?
Yeah, that's something that they proposed to do.
Oh, that's something they proposed?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And then what is the amount of match we've spent? I think this is the third or fourth cycle of this grant.
I believe it's the third? The third, yeah.
What have we spent in matching through the 3-year cycle? Or the 3 cycles, not 3 years?
Charles Rory, Mayor's Office. And I have the information regarding RCPGP 2009 grant.
To speak up.
2009,
Yeah.
we spent $500,403,000.
You said 500,000, 503?
So sorry.
You didn't hear it, you said 503,000 and
No, sorry, 543,000.
543 in 2009.
Yes.
Okay.
And then for 2007 and 8, it was a combined allocation of $6 million, and so therefore, it was an additional, $2 million for the city match.
Okay, 2 million. So this is the third cycle now?
Yes, it is.
Okay, all right. And then, so let me ask this, so I won't have to compute this to CAO. When the housing goes forward with their funds, that will reduce the 621 to what?
It would reduce the general fund obligation by $97,589.
Okay,
Should they use the code enforcement?
Okay, but what is the total then? I'm trying not to take my shoes off.
Give me 1 second to do some really quick math.
Okay.
It's more or less 523.
Yeah.
Okay, 523? All right, very good. Any other questions? Mitch?
No, I don't get nothing.
Nope.
Okay. Let me just, we'll move that item. We just want to ensure that the instruction is that the code enforcement will contribute is it 97 or 98?
It's 97 and change, so
$97,000 plus in the matching, which will reduce the city's general fund to $523,000 in that area, and we'll move this as the third round on this grant. Okay, thank you.
Okay, item number 9 is the Board Review Report relative to requesting authority to remove uncollectible accounts from the active books of the Department of Public Works, Bureau of Sanitation, and the Los Angeles Convention Center.
180,000.
Good afternoon, council members. Shane Min from the Controller's Office.
You got to speak right into that mic.
Good afternoon, council members. Shane Min from the Controller's Office. I am also the chair for the Board of Review. The two items in front of you, Council File 11-1791 is a request from Public Works and LA Convention Center. Public Works is requesting permission to remove 17 invoices totaling $164,502 from their accounts receivables.
We're on number.
And the LA Convention Center is requesting a removal of 3 invoices, $31,666.66.
Okay. I think we pretty well covered. In fact, some of this has been before committee before. Give us some idea on how FMS and the CARS program in the future will aid in our reporting on these types of write-offs.
The FMS reporting?
Yes, when we have that in full shape, and also our centralized account receivable reporting, how is that going to change the way we report these, and how will they be shown in the future when those systems are fully functional?
Councilmember, as far as I understand, the accounts receivable system is basically going to get the summarized data from the systems that already exist in these departments. For example, the police department has CryWolf, which is a much further enhanced accounts receivable system than the one they had before. I believe all the departments have upgraded their accounts receivable systems, and they are...
But when we get to the write-offs, as we're talking about now, how will those systems impact the way we're reporting these?
Well, if you're referring, Matthias Farfan for the Office of the Controller, the centralized accounts receivable reporting system,
yes,
that would be interfacing, if the write-offs are for invoices that were generated from FMS, accounts receivable system, then that's where the departments would just enter them as write-offs within that system, and they automatically get uploaded. But as far as the other systems, like Shane mentioned, if it's CryWolf, the department would still have to enter it into CryWolf that it's been written off, and then when that interfaces with CAR, then in the CAR reports it would be reflected as being written off.
It will always require that it still goes to the Board of Review?
Yes.
Still going to have to do that?
Yes.
And then is it our understanding that at the time we approve this report, that these items are the ones that we send back and they sell it as debt?
For the amounts that are above $5,000, that would be the case. If it's below the $5,000 threshold, once the board approves it, that would give the department the authority to enter it as written off in their system.
But if it's over $5,000, then what, Office of Finance then sells it as uncollectible debt?
I believe that is something that the Office of Finance is going to be doing, that all the items that have been written off by the Board of Review, they will package it and they will issue an RFP to sell the debt.
Now, we say under 1,000 and under, we don't do that, although many of these, if you collectively look at them, they're worth a lot more than just the individual 1,000. So are we going to send everything to be sold as debt?
Yes, if it's been written off, it'll be sold as debt.
Okay, so any write-off, it's sold as debt, no matter what the amount?
Yes.
Okay, very good.
Nope.
Okay, we'll move that item.
For Council File 11-1792, the Department of Building and Safety is asking to remove from its active accounts receivables 2 invoices totaling $12,019.84.
Yeah, we just went through all of them. We don't need to go to individual. Thank you. That's 9 and 10. We'll move that.
Okay. That takes us to item 11, which is the CAO's report relative to the second construction projects report for fiscal year 2011-12. Alma Gibson is here to give us the information.
Hello, good afternoon.
Okay, how are you?
Fine, thank you. My name is Alma Gibson with the CAO's office. As Ray mentioned, this is our second construction projects report for this fiscal year. And as you know, this report primarily includes financial adjustments that are required to keep most of our construction projects on track. There's a total of $27.1 million recommended in transfer and appropriations within this report. Approximately $12.4 million of this is for staff cost reimbursements for salary adjustments on various proposition programs, such as Prop F, the Fire and Animal Bond Program, Prop Q, the Citywide Public Safety Bond Program, and Prop O, the Clean Water Bond Program. Positions for these programs have been authorized by resolution, and funding is for services provided by city staff, which may include program, project, and construction management, project control, which includes monitoring expenditures, and property acquisition. In addition, approximately 12.8 is recommended for appropriations to GSD to perform construction work on various projects in the following categories, such as energy retrofit work, building hazard mitigation work, tenant improvements, and public works improvement projects. Finally, approximately $1.8 million consists of administrative and technical transfers between other city funds for reimbursements of cash flow funding and other payment requirements. As requested by this committee, we've also included in our report the estimated impact due to operations and maintenance costs as a result of these transactions, which we are totaling, it's going to be approximately $609,000, and this is going to be due primarily to some RAP facility expansion work that's being conducted. There's representatives for these projects if you have any questions specific
Let me
to
just
them.
ask a couple of things. On the 609 is in the 2011 budget for the ongoing costs.
It would be for 11, 12, and 12, 13, depending on when the projects are completed.
All right. And then let me ask also on the issue of dealing with the zoo elephant exhibit, and it shows we're spending, I believe, second and third quarter with paying debt service, I think, with Mikola. And
That's correct.
I thought that was something that GLASA had taken over on debt service for the...
Yes, GLASA has taken it over. We're simply indicating to you how much GLASA has contributed in terms of the debt service amounts, and we're asking permission to appropriate it within the debt service account so we could pay the debt service.
Then let me go back. So maybe I misread it. So we're saying there that this is, what it looks like is that...
It's cash.
This is cash that we've received from GLASA.
Name for the record.
Maria Cardenas with the CAO's Office, Municipal Facilities Division. What is included in the report is the payment that GLASA has made.
Okay.
We are making some technical recommendations to accept the money and deposit it into the appropriate account so that we can pay our debt service.
Correct.
All right, so GLASA is paying. The other thing is that, do we have a sense on Prop F, Q, and O, where we are they pretty well exhausted as far as the funding, or where are we on those?
Ramon Soto, also with the CAO's office. Prop F and Q are ongoing viable programs, albeit they are very mature programs. Prop F, on the animal side, we're currently constructing the last of the original authorized projects, South LA Animal Shelter, but also we've accrued about $14 million in savings, and so the council just recently adopted a phase 2 to perform work at a variety of animal shelters with that. So we probably have about another 3 years of activities left on that program. On the fire side of Prop F, we're now completing the last of the original projects, Fire Station 82 in Hollywood, and also with savings there, council has recently authorized 2 new projects, Fire Stations 39 and 7, and in the valley. And so one of those is in design, the other one is still in land acquisition phase, so probably about 3 years left on those. For Prop Q, all of the original authorized projects have been completed. However, again, using about $40 million in savings, where the council recently authorized a phase 2 for Prop Q. That includes renovating the old Rampart Station, 2 projects at the Academy, and I'm missing one. I feel like we're calling Northeast Police Station, a new one. So we're probably going to be heavily involved in ongoing activities for about the next 2 or 3 years, and then we'll probably wind down where they'll all be completed and closed by about 2016-17.
Okay. Now, do you manage also Prop O?
I can't talk to Prop O, but...
And that's not managed through municipal facilities, but through our physical plant section, but do you have a question on that? We might.
No, I was trying to get a...
Project manager here to speak on the problem.
Okay, just the status.
Good afternoon, Kendrick Okuda, Bureau of Engineering, Propositional Program. To date, we have about 32 active projects, of which 8 are presently in construction. A total of 12 projects have been completed. All the $500 million of the bond has been obligated to project implementation. Currently, to date, we've expended about $170 million, and we expect the last project to complete construction in fiscal year 14-15, and that would be the Machado Lake Ecosystem Project.
Okay. And then my final question is that, is there an expectation that the Getty Fund is going to reimburse the city for the fence around the mayor's house, or how's that going to work?
We don't have information about that.
We're not aware of that.
Could we find out with it? Can we determine if that's going to happen?
I think we'd have to follow up.
The foundation was set up for?
We would have to follow up with the foundation on potential reimbursement for that work.
My only question was on the some of the ongoing maintenance costs. Have those been identified on where those future revenues or funds are going to come from? Some of these projects?
Oh, I'm sorry. The last chart you're talking about, attachment 10?
Yeah.
Yes, we're going to have most of it be paid from the RAP budget funds, and then the rest will come from the general fund. They are, let's see, 2 projects are going to be having to be paid from the general fund, the work for the Securus Muro Interpretive Center and the Neighborhood City Hall 14 tenant improvements. And the dollar amounts are specified in the chart.
Tenant improvements, though, aren't ongoing.
What we're talking about are the operations and maintenance costs for new facilities. Our office prepares, as part of the multi-year forecast on the budget, we do include information on the impact on operations and maintenance of new facilities. Over the years, we've had peaks and valleys as we had new police stations, new fire stations added. What Councilmember Parks had asked us to do were, for the projects that are in the construction projects report, to take a closer focused look at it and to provide an estimate as to what the operations and maintenance impact would be. These are usually costs that we anticipate. They're not in the budget yet. They may not be that exact amount. It's something that will go through the budget process. But this is a placeholder in terms of
additional
knowing what the impact of the city is going to be.
Okay, so if it's listed as operations and maintenance, but then that's just what I wanted some clarity on. But then it says seismic repairs, for example, and tenant improvements was one of the examples you brought up.
Right, but that's the description of the project.
Right, and then it says to the right of that, increase for, it does not include security or parking costs. So this isn't necessarily operations and maintenance. It could be one-time repair. So there's...
I think if what we're identifying on the left in that chart is sort of the name of the project. I think when we talk about the 609, what we are trying to identify as best we can, what are those ongoing operational costs?
Correct.
And as you see with the CD14, at this point our estimate doesn't include security or parking, but we do know with that building there are going to be some issues, some costs that the city will incur once that building comes online.
Well, I'm looking at it saying, okay, we're looking at a $3.2 million annual operations and maintenance cost. That doesn't include security and parking.
Yeah, Councilmember Englander, what this report says is that for the Neighborhood City Hall for CD14, this report includes an appropriation to GSD of $3.2 million for tenant improvement work.
Right.
The project itself is about $20 million. What we're estimating, based on our discussions with GSD, is that once that building becomes operational, the annual estimated general fund impact for operations and maintenance is $278,000. However, the caveat that we received from GSD is that at this point, that estimate does not include security or parking.
So we have no idea what that, okay. And then, so what are you asking? This is just an update?
This is informational.
This is on, what we did a couple of years ago is, this used to be part of the budget, and it was pulled out because we couldn't make heads or tails about our programs and construction. So they give us a quarterly, just like we get a financial status report.
This is essentially an FSR and sort of the capital project side.
Capital projects. Because we couldn't make heads or tails of it when it was in the budget.
Okay.
I hope you're able to now. Make heads or tails.
We answered your question? No?
I'm sorry?
Oh, just asked if we satisfied your question on the...
Yeah, I just still trying to make heads or tails out of it. Maybe it should be weekly instead of quarterly. No. Okay. Thank you.
The Prop O that you mentioned, it's $500 million. And you said by what year we'll have spent it all?
The last project that I'm projecting to be completed is fiscal year 14-15, and that will be the Machado Lake Ecosystem Rehabilitation Project.
And all the others will be done by then as well?
That is correct.
The ones under construction now?
That is correct.
It's an incredible set of projects, I'll admit. Do other cities participate with us in the water flow and some of the costs associated with this, like Santa Monica, for instance, in my district?
The city of Santa Monica in particular, we're cooperating with them on the Penmar reuse project, where because of its proximity to the Santa Monica Park, they're right across the border, we plan to partner with Santa Monica to reuse some of that stormwater. We've also partnered with the LA County folks in the valley to leverage Propo funds for the Strathern Pit project, and that would be the LA County flood control folks out in the valley. Does that answer your question, sir?
Yeah, I just want to make sure we're all cooperating with each other. Does Culver City have anyone with us at the moment that we're dealing with too?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
How about LA County?
LA County, once again, the Strathern Pit project is one we're working on. There might be some opportunities also with well, actually, there's some nonprofits that we're partnering also with. They're not city entities, but certainly nonprofits have been another area where Propo has partnered and leveraged Propo monies to accomplish water quality.
Now, is Penmar with the Corporation of Santa Monica happening, or do you need to get them to cooperate?
No, they're cooperating. Yeah, we're cooperating well with them and coordinating with the folks at Santa Monica.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, we'll move this item, and let me just ask a couple things. One, from the verbal reports you've given us today on F, Q, and O, if we can just get a small fact sheet for the clerk to put it in the committee report to give us an update and where we are and what we can expect as those wind down, or what the proposed projects. And then also, if we can ask the CEO to determine whether the Getty Foundation or the Getty Trust is going to reimburse the city for the expenditure of general funds on the security wall at the mayor's house. So those are the two instructions I'd ask.
Thank you, we'll do that.
Thank you. Next item.
Thanks.
Okay, that takes us to the last item, item 12, which is a SAO and CLA joint report relative to the financial plan for the 6th Street Viaduct Improvement Project.
Lori Hancock with the CAO. On September 22nd, the Seismic Governance Committee heard a report from the Bureau of Engineering regarding the 6th Street Viaduct Improvement Project financial plan. On review of that, the CAO and the CLA are providing joint recommendations for that authority. Well, the first thing that they're recommending, and we are recommending, is authority for a total budget for the project of $401 million. They're also requesting authority to submit the financial plan and a letter of commitment to the state and the federal government for the project. The request also includes authority for the use of $98.5 million in MICLA financing, the cash flow of the project, and approval for a staffing plan of up to 10 positions with resolution authority for 4 positions for the current year. The bridge was built in 1932, and it's historical, but it also has a alkalized silica reaction, which is basically a cancer of the concrete, and the bridge is crumbling. So for public safety reasons, we need to take some action. It has potentially a 70% potential of failure in a 7.0 magnitude earthquake. The project includes the demolition of the existing building, the design, the accompanying right-of-way, and of up to 32 parcels, and the construction of a new bridge. The city is going to refine the look of the bridge. Right now, they have had, they're proposing a cable-connected type of bridge, but the final design and the final look of the bridge will be determined through the choice of colors, the choice of textures, the railings, the lightings, and other architectural details. In addition to replacing the crumbling bridge, they're going to straighten out a kink in the roadway that has caused a number of accidents. They're going to be adding pedestrian and bicycle pathways along the bridge as well. Funding for this $401 million project is coming from the Federal Highway Bridge Program and the State Proposition 1B funding, other state funds, and of the $401 million, the city is providing a match of only $5.5 million, which is coming from Prop G and Measure R and CIP. So it's a very highly leveraged project. There are several financial considerations that affect the city, and one of these, the first thing I'd like to talk about, is that the federal government and the state provides their allocation on an annual basis with specified caps associated with each distinct phase of the project. So we will not be getting all of the money for the construction up front. It will be meted out over the course of various years. There is a mechanism that we can employ. It's called Advanced Construction Authority, and that's where the city agrees to fund the project, and we will be spending more money than our allocation each year, so we need to provide advance funding for that. It will ultimately be reimbursed. AC allows the jurisdictions to commit those funds. Without AC, the project is limited to the annual allocation, and the construction component is just not doable. It's just, if you only have $50 million per year, you cannot complete your construction project. It would have to stop and start, and that's just not going to work. The risk in undertaking AC is that it's unlikely, in the unlikely event that the federal government does not provide the dollars that they indicate that they would, the city would be on the hook for potentially for the $401 million to complete the project. Financial risk can be mitigated by requiring VOE to come back to council prior to the award of the construction contract. So after we complete the right-of-way and the design, then we can take a better look at see where the transportation bill is and make some considerations at that point. Cash flow is needed to pay for the components doesn't get reimbursed each year, and the report and staff is proposing that we use $98.5 million in MICLA. It will be cash flowed over the next 5 years. The $8.2 million that is included in the cost of issuance and the interest costs, it will be fully reimbursed by the granting funds, the HPP and the Prop 1B. In improving the financial plan, the city is committing to cash flowing the project expenditures until the annual and state federal reimbursements are available. So, there is also a mitigating potential of getting additional obligation authority from the feds. Each year, other jurisdictions can't spend all of their obligation. So between $20 and $200 million becomes available. If we are in a phase or ready to proceed with a phase that can use those monies, then we have the potential to access those funds. That does not add money to our budget. It just allows us to be assured that those monies will be coming forward. So since this project is, once the environmental documents are approved, we will be ready to move to the design phase. So there is the potential that we would be having more than our annual income, our annual allotment.
Let me just say,
We recommend approval of this report. BOE, of course, is here if you have project-specific questions.
okay. I don't have any project specific. The thing I have most concerns about is how do we protect the general fund if, in the event that these annual payments are not forthcoming, or there's a U-turn in the federal government where they pay a year or two and not pay the third, fourth year. How does the city's general fund get protected once it gets, I can understand holding off on the construction contracts until we know it's going to go, and I would assume we're going to hold off on hiring the personnel until we're ready to know it's going to go. But once it's in process, and if the unforeseen element of not getting the funding, once we put forth the 98 million for cash flow and a few other things, we can't go any farther without the annual contribution. So how do we protect in midstream the city's general fund?
Paul Smith, CLA. To begin with, the city engineers already signed a high commitment letter with the state. That letter states that we're committing to this process subject to the approval of the city council, and the date for that is December 1st of this year. The state has begun its obligation to the city in $401 million. Of course, that obligation is backed by whatever we get through our transportation authorization bills.
Mm-hmm.
The House has already voted on a transportation authorization bill, which is at a low level. It really only authorizes revenue going up to the amount that's collected on the gas tax. The Senate just recently did an amendment coming out of the Environment and Public Works Committee to finance at a much higher level a service transportation and other transportation items coming out of the Senate. Obviously, these got to come together and be reconciled before we can go forward. But from our understanding, there's a lot of bipartisan support for transportation projects because they really go back to the communities. We also, in this report, state that if the federal government does not have some type of approval and authorization process for transit and transportation and roadway projects, we have a recommendation that said to the city engineer, do not enter into contracts until we know that federal funding source is stabilized.
Okay, but on that federal funding source or the state funding source, is that something that we are committed for the life of the project, or is that year to year, or that's what I'll make sure that once they sign off, do we have a commitment for the entire project?
I think generally we've gone from year to year on the authorization and appropriations. The bill now that's moving through is a 2-year. The state of the economy, I think they're going at least 2 years, and not more, but it's going to be on at least a 2-year process. We're all keeping our eye on how these are being constructed, what are the rules of the game, how we're going to get every state, every city is also following us very closely, because this is a job creator, bread and butter, bridges, streets, highways, transit.
But I would assume that once we get started and we're in year 3, and we just can't stop. I mean, if the funds aren't...
No, I don't think we can stop. I think we must...
Hi, Linda Bollinger, HNTB consultant for the City of LA BOE Bridge Program. So I help prepare the financial plan. What this financial plan does from the state and the federal side is commit to the total amount of funds that you see in the report, the $401 million. What there is a potential risk is a year-to-year cash flow risk, which we've incorporated into the plan. Caltrans has said they will commit to $22.5 million per year for right-of-way and $50 million a year for construction. As Lori mentioned earlier, you can accelerate that through advanced construction and obligational authority. However, the ultimate risk is, there could be further delays, and then your risk would be spending more money to cash flow it and therefore more interest.
But we get that back.
But you get that back, yes. The other thing I'd say, although these bills are going through Congress, the current federal authorization is still valid and through a continuing resolution. And so what that resolution says that everything stays at the current status of allocations, which is what this commitment is based on.
I don't disagree with the plan, and I don't disagree with how you set it up. What I'm very, very concerned about is if the state and the federal government do not fulfill their commitment, there's no way the city of LA is going to be able to absorb all or a portion of this project. And so that's what I think. It's one thing to get it started, but it's also a mid-flight correction if they don't fulfill it in the mid-years. how do we protect the City of LA's general fund? And if we can't stop the project in midstream, then how do we fund it if they basically do not fulfill their commitment? It's not like they have not had a history of not fulfilling their commitment. And I think, we have a ton of unfunded mandates from both the state and the federal government. And so that's what I'm looking at. If we get too far along and we have to up our dollar amount on our debt service or our front loading, it then creates a dilemma for us, even in that regard, even if it's short term. And so that's what I want to find out, how tight you can wind this to make sure the general fund is protected.
We've had conversations with Caltrans as has it ever happened that you have not honored your commitment on some of these big high-cost projects? And their answer to me is no. And there have been projects that have been canceled by local agencies, and that's another story. But you have a contract of sorts. This financial plan is a commitment by the state and federal government to fund the entire project. It's a annual keep on top of it kind of cash flow issue, but you do have a signed high cost letter, and you will have a signed financial plan. That's a contract in essence, and that's
you can show that to the judge.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah,
you want to sue the state and the feds. But no, and there is a risk, and we recognize that, and it's built into the plan. Caltrans and Federal Highways is working closely with us to make sure they can afford this, and that's what they've laid out.
Let me ask you one other question on the issue, and maybe this is the BOE question. Is there any greater liability for the city to acknowledge that the bridge is a 70% likelihood of failure with a 7-point-something earthquake, and we're still using it? Is that any additional liability?
Afternoon, John Koo with the Bureau of Engineering. The standard design calls for 10% probability of failure in 50 years. Here we have a structure that has 70% probability, so it's quite a bit higher than the standard.
Okay, but I'm just saying, if we know that, is it a greater liability that we know that and we're still using it?
No, we have been over the years maintaining the structure such that the sufficiency rating is above 50. 50 is the cutoff line where it becomes very deficient, and the feds would really look at replacing the structure. Here we have a score of 52, which is slightly above, but mainly the deficiency is in the seismic. For everyday use, serviceability is not really an issue. So in the case of a major earthquake, then it is very vulnerable.
Okay. And then is there any issue dealing with the fact that it's a historical site? Does that impact how we're going to reconstruct it?
There are some concerns there. There's some voices out there that suggest building it in kind is an aesthetic issue. We don't think is a preservation issue. Mm-hmm. That's coming up in a meeting with the Public Works Committee this Wednesday.
Okay. All right. And then my final question on the CAO is in dealing with the issue of the recent letter by the CAO about freezing our bonding and going forward. How does that impact on this issue of looking for front money? Or will we resolve that before this becomes a reality?
I think we'll have most of those issues resolved by the time we actually need to move into the cash flow portion of the project. But certainly we have our existing letters of credit, and we think they're still valid at this point, and we don't anticipate any changes when it comes to those.
Yeah. So you're trying to sell us a bridge. And then asking me to trust the federal and the state government and Caltrans on top of that. How many bridges total are in need of repair throughout the entire city right now?
There are approximately 500 vehicular bridges in the city, of which roughly 80 to 90 has an issue where the federal government is committed in providing anywhere from 80 to 88% of the funding to rehabilitate or replace those bridges.
Okay. But with that, we're looking at one bridge right now in particular. And it seems to me like a lot of MICLA financing on one, in fact, I think this is one of the highest that I recall seeing in terms of financing in a program like this, although it's creative. And I give it that. I don't know that it solves the overall citywide issue of all the bridges in terms of full replacement, what we're looking at and what SCAG's looking at right now in terms of statewide bridge programs as well, because this has to be a holistic approach. So in looking at one of these and trying to figure this out, where if one thing goes wrong at all in terms of reimbursement costs, and I didn't hear if we were actually, if it was, we were slated to get the actual interest back as well, was that part
Yes.
of it?
Correct.
But in terms of risk, that we're putting out a tremendous amount of faith and risk in such a large number financially for one bridge. That's
Right.
that's my concern when we don't address all the others, and we're not taking or perhaps just in this proposal, in this request, a holistic approach to replacement or repair for all the others, that we've got to look at it as a region. And so I know it's one of the issues regionally we're all looking at as well. But the borrowing program on this one, without a regional approach, is significant in terms of a risk to me. That's just my concern.
Let me introduce myself again, Maria Cardenas with the CIO's office. The Seismic Governance Committee oversees a bridge improvement program that includes a number of bridges throughout the city. All of the other bridge projects are financed with city matches of its general obligation bond, Proposition G, or other city special funds. We have not had to use MICLA financing to cash flow those other projects. We do have a $10 million Public Works Trust Fund loan that cash flows those other projects. Because of the magnitude of this project, we have distinctly separated it and reported to council, and we're requesting $98.5 million in MICLA authority to get us through the gaps of the reimbursement from the feds and the state for right-of-way design and construction. We're not going to draw down, if this gets approved, the $98 million all at one point. We would only use it to provide for the gap between project expenditures on a federal fiscal year basis and expected reimbursements. And we have a chart in our report that shows the expected drawdown and the expected repayment schedule. So we expect to repay the cost of issuance, the interest cost, and the principal back. And that total amount is within the $401 million budget.
The question that I have is, do we have 100% guarantee, without question, that we would get full reimbursement no matter what, that we would not have to stop for any reason on this project?
I don't think that anybody can provide that guarantee. What we have is the high-cost commitment letter. What we have is a contract with the feds and the state. We know that this is one of the most important, in terms of seismic bridges in the state. We had the California Transportation Commission do, I think, 1 or 2 site visits here to come and look at it. We know that the project budget at this point is significant. It requires a small share from the city. But as we do point out in our report, we do have the risk of the federal transportation funding, the FTIP, not happening. It's never happened before. It could happen. At this point going forward, it's a risk to the city of $401 million. As the funding comes in, as the reimbursements come in, the risk shifts to the feds and to the state. And it's a seismically deficient bridge. It's a high-profile bridge. It's very important, and we're recommending moving forward with it. But we cannot guarantee that the federal money will be there. We don't have that authority.
Okay. Yeah, just one question I had was, just want to make sure, it's $401 million project in advance of annual state and federal reimbursement. That's what we're looking at, 401.
401.
Okay. If a new federal transportation bill is not approved, the city would be responsible for completing or canceling the project. Now, here's your clincher. This risk will be mitigated by requiring the city engineer to report to the council before executing a construction contract. Right. So that we feel comfortable enough will help us.
Absolutely, we think we need that recommendation. At this point, we would be doing first right-of-way and design, and the bulk of the project budget is in construction. It's over $230 million, I believe.
We have commitment letters from the state, and in this 2-year period while they do final design, we'll have a better understanding where that federal dollars, how they're going to come and what amount, and what are the conditions on it. We believe that the Congress will go ahead and appropriate the money. So,
what's your time frame on the Congress doing that?
When's the election?
No, because seriously, the election is 12/12. Do you need it before? I mean, not 12/12. It's whatever.
Our understanding is that there are measures taken by the House and the Senate on this. They're going to go to reconciliation. I really can't say how long that's going to take. But we're moving forward. You know, the Energy and Public Works Committee
Have you talked to Jim Clark about it?
We have had discussions. Yes.
Okay, and so is our lobbyists and all that aware of it?
Yes, he is aware. He's looking after that in Washington for us. Here, but with our lobbyists in Washington. So, given the high-profile nature of transportation projects and what they do for the economy, what they do for localities, it seems almost impossible that they would not have a funding mechanism to get to the worst of the worst, and this bridge is right up there.
I couldn't agree with you more, don't get me wrong. Logic is at the window right now in Washington. It is. And there is a gridlocked partisan game going on. The question is, do we need this approval before November of 2012?
Yes. Because of our high commitment letter, we've already promised that we would move forward on this by December 1st.
Of 2011.
This year. If we don't, maybe some of the other monies will evaporate, some of the Prop 1B monies. Other jurisdiction will move. For the very least, we need to capture this money now until that period in time where we know more about the federal dollars and we're through final design. We know what get a better understanding what our construction costs will be.
Yeah, and those monies are needed when? After design.
Well, right now if this moves forward, we'll begin the right-of-way portion of it, buying properties before we can actually do the delivery of the product. And then we'll also do the final design. That's going to be a 2-year project. The bridge now has a standard type we want to use, but that type can have a bunch of architectural design and other addition to it or changes. So through that process, we will have a better understanding of where we are. But we need to act now by December to secure the funds.
But do we have red flags set up in our brain as to if things don't happen here and don't happen there, how far out we go with our commitment and capital dollars?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Because obviously it's key. We're seeing things now in this country that we haven't seen before. And one of them is the gridlock in Washington. There's been gridlock before, but not to the intensity of the politics of the moment.
Construction of this bridge probably won't begin until so the 2014-15.
Okay. Thanks.
Well, there have been a lot of good questions asked and answered, but I'm not sure I got the exact question I want to ask, which is, what's the worst case scenario? What's the worst possible timing where we've committed and spent a certain amount of money and then things don't come in? What if we hit our worst point where we went ahead and we started building or whatever, and then the money wasn't there? How much could we lose? What's the most this could cost us?
We anticipate for the $400 million, we anticipate expenditures of about $100 million in the federal fiscal year 11-12, reimbursements of $32 million. The expenditures stay low for the next 2 years in 12-13, 13-14. In federal fiscal year 14-15, worst case, we would award a construction contract and not have that federal funding in place. At that point, even though the expenditures that year would only be $66 million based on construction progression payments, we would be on the hook for the full contract construction amount.
So what would that mean the city would be shelling out in that worst-case scenario?
I believe the estimated construction cost is 230.
No, it's 200,
Right.
360.
The construction contract, 259?
366.
259 million. And which is why we recommend that BOE come back to the council for authority before we award the construction contract. Because at that point, what we've spent money on is design on the environmental documents and on right-of-way of 32 parcels, which is collateral. I mean, we don't want it as collateral, but we have a physical attribute.
Do we have any way of getting any real certainty of full funding before we go ahead and sign that contract?
We will monitor this very, very closely. Just find out where they're moving and how fast they're moving. At this juncture, I cannot give you a date certain when we know that.
Okay, so it's a little. What do we think the odds are, if you were a betting person, that this kind of thing happens and we don't wind up with the funding that we expect?
I think it's relatively low. Well, maybe Linda has a better answer for you, but.
Well, having worked with funding for 30-plus years, the odds are very, very low that the federal government would shut down and there would no longer be a bridge program. So I think you're pretty assured of that. Having the bill go through before the federal presidential election, I don't know if I'd bet on that, but regardless, you'll have a continuing resolution. The real key is in 14-15 when you start when you're going to be letting your construction contract to have the funds in place there. For that period, Caltrans and the feds will do one step further. They'll sign a final financial plan, which you'll prepare, and that will be a final commitment on the construction funds as well.
So the bottom line is, though, if there's a program we expect to be in it, there's not much of a chance that they'd say, oh, LA is a liberal city, we're going to cut them out.
Yeah. Well, because of that final commitment letter at the end of that period, that 14-15 period, we will know then that we'll have that money to complete the bridge. That's an important juncture. And if we don't, then we're not going to sign contracts. We're not going to sign contract for construction.
And the state has told us we're one of 3 big bridges in the state that are very high priority. This one, Gerald Esmond Bridge with the Port of Long Beach, and the Bay Bridge in San Francisco. So this is a very highly ranked bridge statewide.
Now, in dealing with the opposite issue, we have a not unrealistic chance of having a 7.0 earthquake. I mean, it hopefully won't happen in the next 10 or 20 years, but it could, and it probably wouldn't be a shock to anybody. 70% chance of major damage, bridge collapses, a bunch of people die. Should this bridge still be open, or should we be shutting this thing down tomorrow and just saying, well, sorry, a little more traffic for this area for a while, but should we be thinking about what the odds are of people actually dying because we haven't shut this thing down now that we know how bad it is?
The bridge is inspected once every 2 years by Caltrans, and as I mentioned earlier, the rating that they gave this bridge is at 52. It's low, but it's not the lowest. Once it reaches below 50, then potentially, and it would be up to Caltrans working with the City of LA to make that decision. We have provided maintenance over the years, basically injecting the bridge with epoxy for all the cracks that are there. So it is being maintained as far as serviceability for the everyday traffic use. So as far as seismic vulnerability, this bridge is what they call a Category 1 bridge. There are approximately 400 of these bridges left in California. 6th Street is among the worst because of the alkali silica reaction that the CEO alluded to earlier. So the two in combination makes this bridge very vulnerable and a top priority in California.
Well, the question is, though, it functions if there's no earthquake. If there's a big earthquake, it's a real danger. So should we be shutting it down rather than wait for it to hit some relatively bureaucratic number, which it could worsen and hit that at some point in the next few years, presumably, but even if it doesn't, if it could collapse in an earthquake, and we know there's a decent chance of it, why are we not shutting it down now?
Again, it gets back to the sufficiency rating, and as we view it now, it's still serviceable for normal everyday traffic.
You're not answering my question.
I think the answer may lie in the fact that if Caltrans does these monitorings on a 2-year, they have not said, or at least I understand them, I don't know if they said to the bridge program folks, that this thing needs to be shut down within a certain period of time. I don't think that has been vocalized by Caltrans, who does these testing. So unless that is different, they can come in and say, I haven't heard it, and I don't know if anybody else in the program.
Can we make that decision on our own if this is that kind of danger?
Sure. We could.
Have we looked at that as a possibility? Has there ever been discussion of it?
What was the question?
The question is 70% chance of a bridge collapse in a major earthquake. Have we looked at the possibility of shutting this down as a city, since apparently we can do it? We don't have to wait for Caltrans. Should we be doing it?
Well, that would be a policy decision, and we have discussed this with Caltrans, and currently the answer is no, is still serviceable. We are taking a risk.
I mean, I would think it'd be a pretty big risk, and we're aware of it. We have that kind of an earthquake, 20 people die on the bridge. Every one of them should be suing the city of Los Angeles. We've just had a public conversation about how 70% chance of collapse in a truly major earthquake.
Well, we got a lot of stuff like that around here.
Yeah. Well, that is the question. Do we have bridges that are in worse shape than this in the city of Los Angeles? Anything close?
Yeah.
Well, this is the worst one. Actually, statewide, this is one of the worst. That's why we're getting $30 million from Prop 1B.
I don't know. Well, it's not in my district, but it sure does make me uncomfortable.
Well, we would like to move as fast as we could.
I got it. Who's the Congress member of this area?
CD 14.
Who's the congressman?
Oh, congressman.
Javier Becerra, no?
Sarah? Yeah, I think so.
Well, if we're all sitting here trying to make a decision on what the federal government's going to do, and we're not sure who the congressman is of this bridge, I'm not sure we've got a strong commitment from the federal government. I just can't support it. And I'd like to see if we could perhaps put together perhaps a task force to go work with the congressman to see if the federal government, they print money, and then they take it away from us. And maybe perhaps there's a plan where they can front fund it, where they'd be willing to put it in one of their earmarks or something on an emergency transportation bill. I would think there's a lot of opportunities. It's great that we've talked to our lobbyists in Washington. It sounds like we've got to talk to our congressman in Washington, or at least even the Southern California delegation. I would think there would be a strong appeal for this, and I'd like to see that done. Well, so that's just my perspective. I'm not even making a motion. I'm just stating my.
May I say that just 2 weeks ago, Senator Boxer was here with a press conference on MAP 21, the bill, transportation bill, and she used 6th Street as the backdrop.
And that's mildly interesting. I appreciate that, and it's a great backdrop. But did she go out there and say that she is going to make sure that LA is not on the hook for trying to borrow money to get it reimbursed from the federal government, and then that she would make this a legislative priority to work out a funding source? And or are we just trying to? I mean, this is creative. Don't get me wrong, and we've got to be creative in tough times where
I think they recognize that problem. That's why in the transportation bill, they talk about the TIFIA loan, increasing that to $1 billion, because they recognize the cash flow as a problem. It's just not a matter of funding the project.
I get that, and I also get that there's a lot of other bridges. I mean, we've got a big problem in this package. It doesn't talk at all about all the other bridges citywide, where those are at, what the percentages are at, what it would cost to fix the ones, what are the ones that are going to reach this same percentage or 70% deterioration in the next few years, and what those are. So and those are the questions that should be done in Public Works. This was waived out of Public Works, which is just yet another concern that I have. If this is a major project, and it's a Public Works infrastructure project, why it was waived out of that committee is beyond me. That's a very troubling concern, but that's just where I'm at with it. So
the EIR will be before Public Works on Wednesday on this project.
An EIR, but not the project prior to the EIR.
Not the financing plan.
Never came. So I'm not sure, where, like I said, what the priorities are of the service area of this from the Public Works perspective, or the congressman of the area, and it sounds like there's just too much at risk. So, I didn't want to cut you off.
Oh, no.
I was just making my observations. I think all the questions were asked, but that's just my perspective.
Do we need to make a motion to say, go to Javier Becerra, go to Barbara Boxer, go to the members of the House, to the delegation, and get some energy going with there instead of just assuming ho-hum? Would that be helpful?
I was Linda Bollinger again, H&DB. I was just going to mention that the Highway Bridge Program funds are formula funds. They get delegated to California and Caltrans. However, having said that, your congressional delegation can be very helpful in making sure that Caltrans and Federal Highways processes these commitments and makes these commitments every year and keeps this as high priority.
I'll make a motion that we do that.
I'll second that. I think we clearly need more of a push with our congressional delegation, I think, to make sure this happens.
Let me ask, is there a timeline?
It's not partisan.
We plan to have the commitment letter executed by December 1st. Before this goes to the full council, though, we will report back on outreach efforts and contacts that we will make starting tomorrow with the congressional delegation.
All right. Colleagues, if we can move this forward because of the due date, and then also that we were told that this is the second worst bridge in the state. Second.
And look, when we have our infrastructure day in January, we'd like a complete update on all of our bridges and construction.
All right. So if we move the CAO report, and let me ask one other question.
Joint CAO-CLA report.
Okay, joint CAO-CLA report.
Yes.
You put me down as a no vote on that.
October 18th. But let me ask you this, is that in addition to the coming back before doing the contract, is there a need to hire personnel before that time also?
Before the construction contract? Yes.
All right. Now, what do we need? Because the thing is...
We recommended 4 resolution authority positions that would be needed in this city fiscal year.
All right. Let me say this, then. Let me ask...
And if we would be paid for within the $401 million budget, the direct and related costs.
Okay, the budget that we haven't had yet. Okay. Let me add that if we move, colleagues, on the October 18th joint report by the CAO-CLA, that we add an instruction per Mr. Rosenthal's motion to request that we have the congressional delegation for Los Angeles be contacted regarding ensuring that as best we can the funding is forthcoming during the life of the project. We ask the CAO to work with the city engineer, in keeping the number of personnel positions to the minimum until the contracts are signed as per the direction of the committee, the report that we will not, the city engineer will report back to the council before executing any construction contracts. And so if we can add those instructions and move the report forward, then we can get this additional information to meet the December 1st deadline.
Thank you very much.
Okay. You have agreed?
Oh, okay, so we are recording this on the 3-1?
No, so it's
3-1.
3-1.
Okay.
No, I just wanted,
Okay.
we got the vote.
So is it, we're adjourned.
That's